She was 20, he was 61. In the salons of Europe, this union was called nothing less than a sacrifice. The groom was King William III of the Netherlands, a man with the reputation of a libertine, tyrant, and madman, openly dubbed King Gorilla for his uncontrollable fits of rage. Foreign princesses fled from him in terror. His own sons despised him, and ministers crossed themselves before entering the royal cabinet. Her name was Emma. She was a quiet princess from a tiny German principality, possessing neither political experience nor metropolitan polish. The entire continent was convinced the young German princess was being thrown into the beast's maw merely to prolong the agony of a dying dynasty. Journalists laid bets on how many months the naive girl would last before losing her mind in the grim corridors of the palace in The Hague or fleeing back to her parents. They were wrong. 11 years later, this violent old man would die in her arms, physically broken, but peaceful for the first time in his life. And the unknown victim would close his eyes, don mourning dress, step out before the bewildered ministers, and take the destiny of an entire nation into her own hands. She would not merely outlive the old despot. She would become Queen Regent, rescue the monarchy from an imminent Republican collapse, outmaneuver seasoned politicians in the corridors of power, and raise a daughter who would alter the course of world history. This is the story of a woman who was handed over to a monster and turned his crumbling throne into her impregnable realm. In Arolsen Castle, where Emma of Waldeck and Pyrmont spent her childhood, there were no golden mirrors of Versailles. Life here was governed by a strict Spartan puritanism. The princely house of Waldeck and Pyrmont could not boast vast wealth, but it was renowned for its steadfast Lutheran faith, immaculate discipline, and uncompromising sense of duty. While the European aristocracy squandered their lives at court balls, Emma learned to sew, tend to the sick in local infirmaries, and balance household ledgers. She possessed no arrogance, yet beneath her quiet voice and steady gaze lay an unyielding inner core that even her parents did not fully appreciate. Meanwhile, in 1877, a dynastic catastrophe unfolded in The Hague. Queen Sophie passed away, the wretched wife of William III, who had endured nearly 4 decades of marriage in an unrelenting inferno of mutual contempt. The king's eldest son, Prince William, the Prince of Orange, had fled to Paris, drowned in family grudges in absinthe and debt. The youngest, Prince Alexander, harbored a visceral hatred for his father and withdrew into secluded isolation. The royal house of Orange-Nassau stood at the edge of biological extinction. The 60-year-old William III urgently needed a consort to secure an heir. He embarked on a bride hunt across Europe, but royal houses slammed their doors in his face. Princesses in Denmark and the German states wept at the mere thought of betrothal to an aging tyrant whose scandals reverberated across the continent. When William arrived in Arolsen, his first choice was Emma's elder sister, Pauline. The young woman fell into hysterics, and then 20-year-old Emma stepped forward. She saw before her a corpulent man with a bloated face, bloodshot eyes, and a heavy cane in hand. The age gap was 41 years. He was old enough to be her grandfather. Yet where others saw only a nightmare and disgrace, Emma recognized her calling. She understood that this was no love match. It was a sacred duty before God and dynasty. On January 7th, 1879, in the chapel of Arolsen Castle, they stood side by side. The press sneered. a lamb led to slaughter by the wolf. They did not know that the lamb was forged of pure Damascus steel. Emma's arrival in The Hague felt like walking onto a minefield. The Dutch court greeted the foreign bride with icy disdain and poorly concealed schadenfreude. The proud Dutch nobility had no desire to bow to a provincial German girl. The cabinet braced for domestic scandals, while the radical press published caricatures ridiculing the monarch's senile lust. Yet Emma adopted a strategy for which the mercurial king was entirely unprepared: absolute, unshakable composure. When William III, in fits of fury, smashed antique vases, bellowed at servants, and demanded the cabinet's dismissal, Emma did not flee the room in tears. She would sit quietly in the armchair opposite him, take up her needlework, and look him straight in the eye with a calm dignity that the tyrant found disarming. She never raised her voice. Her soft, measured tones acted upon the enraged king like a blast of cold water. Step by step, the young queen purged the royal household. She banished the king's disreputable drinking companions, halted reckless financial squandering, established immaculate bookkeeping, and restored the respectful decorum that the court had long abandoned. William III, accustomed to being either feared or loathed, found himself captivated by this quiet, exceptionally shrewd woman. He began to seek her counsel and approval. For the first time in decades, tranquility settled over the palace. On August 31, 1880, the union bore its first fruit. Emma gave birth to a daughter, Wilhelmina. The aging king wept over the cradle like a child, yet the dynastic shadow lingered. Just months after Emma's wedding, on June 11, 1879, the king's eldest son died in Paris, and in June 1884, the last surviving male heir, the reclusive Prince Alexander, passed away. Not a single male heir remained in the House of Orange. 4-year-old Wilhelmina became the sole heiress to the throne of a vast colonial empire, and Emma realized that destiny would no longer permit her to be merely a mother. The late 1880s became a harrowing, exhausting ordeal for Emma. William III's health deteriorated rapidly. Renal failure, physical debility, bouts of delirium, and senile paranoia turned his final years into a prolonged agony. Het Loo Palace was plunged into oppressive gloom. Emma refused to surrender her husband to hired nurses. She spent sleepless nights at his bedside, dressing his wounds, enduring his hallucinations, and absorbing his sudden outbursts of irrational aggression. Yet the true battleground was statecraft. As the old king faded behind drawn curtains, Emma quietly assumed effective control of the realm. Only she was permitted into the dying monarch's chambers. Cabinet ministers came to deliver their reports directly to this 30-year-old woman. They had hoped to manipulate an inexperienced royal consort, but were met with formidable political acumen. Emma had mastered the Dutch language, thoroughly studied every article of the nation's complex constitution, and understood the intricacies of colonial taxation and governance better than half the cabinet. Concurrently, she directed an uncompromising regimen for her daughter's upbringing. Young Wilhelmina was raised under almost Spartan discipline, no indulgences, no frivolous distractions. "Your life does not belong to you," Emma would quietly tell the weeping, exhausted child. "You have no right to weakness. You are an orange." In the autumn of 1890, the king lost all lucidity. On November 14th, Parliament declared William III incapacitated. A few days later, On November 20th, 1890, Emma stood before the States General and took the oath as regent. 3 days later, on November 23rd, 1890, the king died. Emma stood beside his cooling body. The old king had departed, taking an era of scandal and tyranny to the grave with him. Ahead lay a nation standing at the crossroads between the crown and a republic. All sovereign authority now rested in the hands of a 32-year-old widow. The late 19th century was a time of seismic shifts in the Netherlands. Industrialization expanded rapidly, and socialists organized mass rallies in the squares of Amsterdam, demanding the abolition of an expensive puppet monarchy. Republican politicians openly declared that the death of William III was the perfect moment to extinguish the House of Orange forever. Standing against them was a solitary woman in modest black mourning silk. Emma orchestrated a masterclass in statecraft, demonstrating that regal grace and composure could prove far more formidable than bayonets. She effectively pioneered modern royal public relations. Recognizing that the public had grown weary of aloof, arrogant rulers, Emma took 10-year-old Wilhelmina by the hand and embarked on extensive tours of the country. They visited all 11 provinces, without hiding behind armed cavalry detachments. In the fishing villages of Zeeland, Emma entered humble cottages to comfort women whose husbands had been lost at sea. In Limburg, she met coal miners coated in coal dust. In the factories of Utrecht, she spoke directly to textile workers. She presented the nation with a different kind of monarchy, accessible, empathetic, and unblemished. The image of the young golden-haired queen beside her dignified, widowed mother softened the hearts of the fiercest skeptics. Republican fervor began to melt away like spring ice. Yet within the halls of government, Emma remained a formidable grandmaster. She attended every session of the Council of State. She never signed a single bill into law without scrutinizing every clause. Male ministers who attempted to impose questionable appointments or imperial adventures were met with icy politeness. Emma disarmed them with her flawless mastery of constitutional law and razor-sharp logic. During her 8 years of regency, she achieved the extraordinary. She never once breached the Constitution, never provoked a political crisis, and elevated the prestige of the crown to unprecedented heights. On August 31st, 1898, Wilhelmina turned 18, and on September 6th, her solemn inauguration took place at the Nieuwe Kerk in Amsterdam. In accordance with Dutch constitutional tradition, the monarch was not crowned. Instead, the crown rested symbolically on the credence table beside the Constitution, while the young queen, draped in the royal ermine mantle, delivered her oath in a clear, resonant voice. She carried herself as a consummate sovereign, having been trained by the best. Emma sat in the front row. She made no attempt to cling to power, as countless regents before her had done. She surrendered the throne to her daughter, stable, dignified, and beloved by an entire nation. Her momentous mission as ruler was complete. After 1898, Emma did something that earned her the profound respect of her contemporaries. She voluntarily stepped into the background. There were no backstage intrigues, no attempts to manipulate her adult daughter. Emma relocated to the palace on Lange Voorhout in The Hague, retaining only the modest title of Queen Mother. Yet her battle was not over. She merely turned her attention to a new adversary. Emma channeled her formidable energy and personal wealth into combating tuberculosis, the disease that had claimed her sister and was devastating thousands of working-class families. She established and personally oversaw the Emma Fund, built world-class sanatoriums such as Orange Nassau's Oord, procured advanced medical equipment, and laid the foundations for the first nationwide public health initiative against pulmonary disease in the Netherlands. To the Dutch people, she ceased to be merely a historical figure. She became the beloved grandmother of the nation, a living pillar of stability in a turbulent world. In 1909, when Wilhelmina finally gave birth to a daughter, Princess Juliana, after years of heartbreaking miscarriages, Emma showered her granddaughter with the warmth and tenderness she had once felt compelled to withhold from Wilhelmina for the sake of the crown. She watched the great empires collapse in the crucible of the First World War. The Romanovs fell, the German Empire crumbled, and Austria-Hungary dissolved. Monarchs fled their capitals by the dozen. Yet the Dutch throne stood unshaken, anchored in the deep reservoir of public trust and affection built decades earlier by a once dismissed German bride. She passed away quietly in the early spring of 1934. A mild bout of bronchitis developed into pneumonia, and on March 20th, at the age of 75, the heart of Emma of Waldeck and Pyrmont ceased to beat. On the day of her funeral, The Hague stood still. Cold rain fell, yet hundreds of thousands of people lined the streets. Factory workers removed their caps, and veterans wept openly. These were not perfunctory honors paid to a deceased noblewoman. A nation was bidding farewell to the woman who had bestowed upon them stability, dignity, and a future. Long ago, she had been brought to this country as little more than a silent consort to secure an heir for a failing king. She was expected to be a mere footnote in the genealogical ledger between an aging tyrant and the inevitable fall of the monarchy. Instead, she salvaged an alien dynasty, tamed an untamable husband, won over a skeptical parliament, and forged a modern constitutional monarchy that thrives to this day. She demonstrated to the world that true power belongs not to those who shout the loudest or wield the sword, but to those who possess the patience to endure, the wisdom to build, and the devotion to love their life's work more than their own comfort. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. It helps our channel grow. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone. See you in the next video.